The cold metal floor pressed against Jake Morrison's face as consciousness slowly returned to him. His body felt heavy and strange after the long sleep. The cryogenic chamber hissed as it finished its wake-up cycle. Jake pushed himself up on shaking arms and looked around the small medical bay. Everything seemed normal except for one thing. He was supposed to wake up with the rest of his crew. Jake stumbled to the nearest computer terminal and checked the ship's status. The numbers on the screen made his heart race. He had been asleep for 103 years instead of the planned 20. The ship's navigation system showed they were nowhere near their destination. They had traveled far beyond the edge of known space into the void between galaxies. "Aria, status report," Jake called out to the ship's artificial intelligence. "Commander Morrison, welcome back. I apologize for the early wake-up, but we have encountered an unusual situation." AI's calm voice filled the room. "A navigation malfunction during year 47 of our journey sent us off course. We are currently in the Kepler void, approximately 2 million light-years from our intended destination." Jake rubbed his temples, trying to process this information. "What about the crew?" "All 47 crew members remain in stable cryosleep. I awaken you because sensors have detected artificial structures in this region. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Jake walked to the bridge and activated the main view screen. Space looked different here. The familiar stars of human territory were gone, replaced by distant galaxy clusters that sparkled like jewels in the darkness. But something else caught his attention, a massive structure floating in the void, dark and silent. "How big is that thing?" Jake asked. "Approximately 8,000 kilometers in diameter, Commander. It appears to be artificial, constructed from materials unknown to human science. The structure is emitting low-level energy readings consistent with active technology." Jake stared at the object. It looked like a giant sphere covered in complex patterns and geometric shapes. Parts of it seemed to shimmer and move in the dim light of distant stars. Despite its enormous size, it appeared lifeless and abandoned. Any signs of life? Negative. However, the structure contains vast internal spaces. I am detecting what appears to be atmosphere in some sections. Jake made his decision quickly. After coming this far, he had to investigate. Prepare a shuttle and an environmental suit. "I'm going over there." "Commander, I must advise against this course of action. We know nothing about this structure or its creators." "We also know nothing about how to get home," Jake replied. "Maybe whoever built this thing can help us. Besides, we're explorers. This is what we do." The shuttle journey to the structure took 3 hours. As Jake approached, he could see that the surface was covered in symbols and markings that seemed to shift and change when he looked directly at them. He found what appeared to be a docking bay, a circular opening large enough for his shuttle. Inside the structure, Jake discovered corridors filled with a soft blue light that had no visible source. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch. His scanner showed the atmosphere was breathable, so he removed his helmet. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else he could not identify. Jake walked deeper into the structure, his footsteps echoing in the vast empty halls. The architecture was beautiful, but alien, curved walls that defied geometry, chambers that seemed larger inside than outside, and doorways that opened at his approach without any visible controls dot in what seemed to be a central chamber. Jake found them holographic projectors that activated as he entered. Tall, graceful beings appeared before him, their forms translucent and flickering. They had elongated limbs and faces that seemed both ancient and wise. When they spoke, somehow, Jake understood their words. "Greetings, unknown traveler. We are the architects, the first children of consciousness in this galaxy cluster. If you can understand these words, then we are long dead, and you are our chosen successor." Jake watched in amazement as the hologram continued. "We seeded life across 10,000 worlds before the Great Darkness came for us. This sanctuary contains the knowledge and genetic patterns of all the civilizations we helped create. You have found us in our final hour, which means the responsibility now falls to you. The holographic architect gestured to the walls around them, which began to glow with flowing patterns of light. The enemy we call the Silence approaches once more. It consumes not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Where it passes, nothing remains, not even the memory that something once was. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What am I supposed to do about it? You are now the guardian of 10,000 civilizations. The knowledge of the architects is yours to command. Learn quickly, for the Silence has already begun its work. The outer systems fall as we speak, and the wave of destruction moves toward the heart of our galaxy cluster. The hologram began to fade. Choose wisely, Guardian. The fate of all thinking beings now rests in your hands. Jake stood alone in the vast chamber as the last traces of the hologram disappeared. The weight of what he had just learned pressed down on him like a physical force. Somewhere out there, 10,000 different species lived their lives, unaware that their existence hung by a thread. And somehow, he was supposed to save them all. Jake spent the next 3 days learning to use the architect systems. The technology responded to his thoughts in ways that seemed impossible. When he placed his hands on the glowing control surfaces, information flowed directly into his mind. The process was overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a waterfall. The architects had been busy during their millions of years of existence. They had watched over countless worlds, guiding young civilizations through their first steps into space. Jake saw glimpses of their history through the data streams. Beautiful crystal cities that sang in harmony with their planet's magnetic field. Ocean worlds where intelligent whales built underwater metropolises. Desert planets where rock base. Life forms carved magnificent sculptures from mountain ranges. Each civilization was different, but they all shared one thing. They had been helped by the architects. The ancient beings had provided just enough guidance to prevent extinction events, shared just enough knowledge to spark scientific breakthroughs, and offered just enough protection to allow growth and development. But the architects had made one crucial mistake. They had kept themselves separate from the civilizations they protected. They observed from a distance, never truly connecting with the species they helped. This isolation had made them wise but also cold and calculating. They saw patterns and statistics where Jake saw individual lives and stories. Arya, are you monitoring this? Jake asked, as another wave of information crashed through his consciousness. Yes, Commander. The data transfer rate is extraordinary. I am recording everything for later analysis. However, I am concerned about the strain this is placing on your neural pathways. Jake ignored the warning. He needed to understand what he was dealing with. The Silence was not just another enemy. It was something that challenged the very concept of existence. The architect records showed entire star systems simply vanishing, leaving behind voids where even space and time ceased to function. The pattern was always the same. First, the outer planets would go dark. Their signals would simply stop, as if they had never existed. Then the phenomena would spread inward, consuming everything in its path. Ships sent to investigate would disappear without sending back any data. Even long-range sensors would show nothing, not empty space, but literally nothing at all. Jake studied the tactical reports from the architect's final battle. They had tried everything, weapons that could destroy stars, shields that bent reality itself, even attempts to communicate with the Silence. Nothing had worked. The enemy was patient and methodical, advancing at a steady pace that allowed no escape. How long do we have? Jake asked the computer systems. The answer appeared in his mind instantly. Based on the Silence's current rate of advance, it would reach the core systems of the galaxy cluster in approximately 57 years. That seemed like a long time, but Jake knew it would pass quickly when dealing with the politics and logistics of 10,000 different civilizations. Jake accessed the communication network that connected all the architect-seeded worlds. The scope of it amazed him. Quantum relay stations built into the fabric of space itself allowed instant communication across thousands of light years. The network covered every inhabited system in the galaxy cluster, linking civilizations that had never even heard of each other. But the network also revealed a troubling truth. Many of the civilizations were already at war with each other. Ancient grudges and territorial disputes had erupted into conflicts that spanned multiple star systems. Some species had developed weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. Others had retreated into isolation, refusing all contact with the outside galaxy. Jake began to understand why the architects had failed. They had focused on preventing extinction from natural causes, asteroid impacts, supernovas, climate change. But they had never addressed the fundamental problem of getting different species to work together. Each civilization had developed in isolation, creating unique cultures and belief systems that often conflicted with their neighbors. The first time Jake tried to access the genetic banks, the experience nearly knocked him unconscious. The architects had stored the complete biological templates for every species. They had encountered not just the dominant intelligent life forms, but entire ecosystems. Billions upon billions of different organisms, each perfectly preserved. In quantum storage matrices, Jake saw forests of metallic trees that conducted electricity between their roots. Floating jellyfish-like creatures that lived in the upper atmospheres of gas giants. Microscopic beings that existed as pure information, inhabiting the processing cores of ancient computers. The diversity was staggering and beautiful, but it was also a reminder of what was at stake. All of this, every unique form of life, every culture, every work of art or scientific discovery, will be lost if the silence continued its advance. The enemy did not just kill. It erased things so completely that they had never existed in the first place. Jake spent hours studying the architect's analysis of the phenomenon. The silence seemed to operate on principles that human science could barely comprehend. It existed partially outside normal spacetime, which allowed it to affect the past as well as the present. When it consumed a star system, it retroactively removed that system from history. The only reason the architects could remember what had been lost was because their sanctuary existed in a specially protected pocket of reality. "Commander, I have been analyzing the data you have accessed," Arya said. "There is something the architects may have missed." Jake looked up from the control interface. "What is it?" "The silence appears to target civilizations in a specific order. It does not simply advance randomly. There is a pattern to its selection of targets." Jake felt a chill of realization. "It's going after the most advanced civilizations first." "Exactly. The species with the greatest technological capabilities are consumed before they can mount an effective defense. This leaves the younger civilizations isolated and vulnerable." Jake understood the implications immediately. The silence was not just a force of destruction. It was intelligent and strategic. It knew that advanced civilizations might find a way to fight back, so it eliminated them first. By the time the remaining species realized what was happening, they would lack the technology and knowledge needed to resist. But this also meant there might be an opportunity. If Jake could find a way to unite the surviving civilizations before the silence reached them, they might have a chance. The key would be convincing species that had been enemies for thousands of years to suddenly work together against the threat. They could barely understand. Jake made his decision. He would have to wake his crew and explain the situation to them. Then they would begin the impossible task of building an alliance among 10,000 different worlds. The architects had failed because they tried to protect everyone from a distance. Jake would succeed by bringing everyone together. Jake's first attempt at contact nearly started a war. He had chosen what seemed like a reasonable target, a peaceful trading confederation called the Harmony Worlds. Their records showed them as diplomatic and cooperative. Jake sent a simple greeting through the architect communication network, identifying himself as the new guardian. The response came back in the form of a battle fleet. "Unknown entity. You will cease this deception immediately, the fleet commander's voice crackled. Through the speakers. The Guardians died out long ago. We will not tolerate attempts to manipulate us with false claims. Jake found himself explaining his situation to weapons pointed at the Architect's sanctuary. The Harmony worlds had apparently suffered through several recent conflicts with species claiming divine authority. His announcement had triggered every defensive protocol they possessed. It took 6 hours of careful negotiation and demonstrating Architect technology before the fleet commander agreed to listen. Even then, Jake could sense their skepticism. The idea that a primitive species from the edge of known space had somehow inherited the Architect's legacy seemed impossible to them. Jake's second contact went even worse. The Resonance Weavers were one of the oldest surviving civilizations, existing as crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic vibrations. When Jake reached out to them, their response was a psychic scream that gave him a headache for 3 days. Inferior flesh being dares to claim the ancient seat. Their message translated roughly. Your species crawled from mud while we sang. Among the stars. Begone before we decide to silence your pathetic world. Arya monitored Jake's vital signs as he tried repeatedly to establish meaningful contact with different civilizations. The stress was taking its toll. Each failed attempt meant more time wasted while the silence continued its advance. Commander, perhaps we should reconsider this approach, Arya suggested. Direct contact seems to be creating more problems than solutions. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. He had been working for 2 weeks straight, surviving on stimulants and determination. There has to be a way to make them listen. The Architect's records show these species can work together when necessary. Yes, but always in response to immediate threats they could understand. The silence is too abstract, too far away. They cannot see the danger clearly enough to overcome their natural suspicions. Jake studied the network traffic between different civilizations. Most of it consisted of trade negotiations, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges. But buried in the routine communications, he found something interesting: distress calls. The aquatic depth singers were facing a crisis. A mysterious plague was killing their population across dozens of ocean worlds. Their beautiful songs were becoming funeral dirges as entire cities fell silent beneath the waves. They had reached out to every known medical authority in the galaxy, but no one could identify the cause of the disease. Jake saw his opportunity. Instead of announcing himself as the new Guardian, he would prove his worth through actions. He accessed the Architect medical databases and cross-referenced them with the Depth Singer biology files. The answer became clear almost immediately. The plague was not a disease at all. It was a genetic time bomb left behind by an ancient enemy of the Depth Singers. The weapon had been designed to activate after thousands of years, when the original creators were long dead. The Architects had encountered similar bioweapons before and developed countermeasures. Jake sent the cure formula to the Depth Singers without identifying himself. He simply signed the message as a friend and included enough technical details to prove the solution would work. Then he waited. The response came 3 days later. The Depth Singer representative's voice carried a melody of pure gratitude that made Jake's eyes water with its beauty. Unknown benefactor, your gift has saved billions of lives. Our children sing again in the deep places. How may we repay this debt? Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. I ask only that you listen to what I have to say. This time, when Jake explained his role as Guardian, the reaction was completely different. The Depth Singers had seen proof of his access to Architect knowledge. They listened carefully as he described the approaching silence and his plan to unite the galaxy's civilizations. The deep currents carry whispers of darkness, their representative agreed. We have felt the songs grow quieter in the outer reaches. If you speak truth about this silence, then all life is in danger. Word of Jake's success spread through the Depth Singer communication networks. Other species began paying attention. When the aquatic beings started talking about a new Guardian who backed up his claims with actions, Jake received his first formal Alliance requests from a small confederation of mining worlds that had heard about the cure, but success also brought new challenges. Not everyone was happy about Jake's growing influence. The Storm Riders, massive energy beings who lived in the atmospheres of gas giants, sent him a warning message. Young species meddles with forces beyond understanding. The natural order must not be disrupted, cease these activities, or face consequences. Jake learned that there was an informal council of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. They called themselves the Transcendents and viewed themselves as the rightful inheritors of architect authority. To them, Jake represented a dangerous disruption of the established order. The leader of this group was a being known only as the Prime Consciousness. According to the records, it had once been part of a biological species, but had long ago uploaded itself into a quantum computer network spanning several star systems. The Prime Consciousness had been negotiating with other ancient civilizations to join it in transcending physical existence entirely. Jake realized he was facing a three-way conflict. The silence threatened everything from outside the galaxy. The Transcendents wanted to abandon physical reality rather than fight, and thousands of younger civilizations were caught in between. Unaware of either threat, his breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The insectoid hive builders sent him a message encrypted in mathematical equations. They had been monitoring the outer systems and detected the advancing wave of nothingness that marked the silence's progress. Query: Guardian speaks truth about extinction event. Hive builders request verification of defensive capabilities. Jake accessed the Architect weapon systems for the first time. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. The ancient beings had built defenses capable of destroying entire star systems, but they had also documented the complete failure of these weapons against the silence. Negative on direct defensive capability, Jake replied honestly. Architect: weapons prove ineffective. Alternative strategy required. The Hive builder's response surprised him. Alternative strategy: Hive survival through cooperation proven effective. Unity increases survival probability. Hive builders request alliance terms. Within days, Jake had his first major ally. The Hive builders controlled 17 star systems and possessed some of the galaxy's most advanced manufacturing capabilities. More importantly, they understood the concept of sacrifice for the greater good. News of the alliance sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The Hive builders were known for their isolationist policies. If they were joining forces with the mysterious new Guardian, the situation had to be truly serious. Jake found himself fielding communications from hundreds of civilizations, each wanting to know more about this approaching threat. Some offered alliance, others demanded proof, and still others threatened military action if he continued to spread panic. But the momentum was building. For the first time since awakening in the Architect Sanctuary, Jake felt hope. The galaxy's civilizations could be united. The question was whether they could do it in time. The news reached Jake through the emergency channels. 3 civilizations had gone silent in a single day. The Glimmerfolk, who built cities of living light on asteroid fields. The Void Dancers, nomadic beings who travel between dimensions. The Ancient Archive Keepers, who stored the collected knowledge of 1,000 worlds in crystalline memory banks. All gone without warning, without even time to send a distress call. Jake stared at the tactical display showing the advancing boundary of nothingness. The silence had accelerated its attack, moving faster than the Architect projections had predicted. Instead of 57 years, Jake now had perhaps 20 years before the phenomenon reached the galaxy's core systems. Panic spread through the communication networks. Species that had been debating alliance terms suddenly demanded immediate protection. Others began preparing massive evacuation fleets to flee deeper into the galaxy. A few, like the warlike Flame Bearers, declared their intention to fight the silence with nuclear fire. They don't understand, Jake muttered as he monitored the chaos. You can't fight something that erases you from existence. You can't run from something that consumes space itself. The crisis deepened when the Transcendents made their move. The Prime Consciousness sent a galaxy-wide broadcast on all communication frequencies, its artificial voice carrying the weight. Of eons, children of matter, the time of flesh has ended. The cosmos itself rejects your crude existence. We offer salvation through transcendence. Abandon your primitive physical forms and join us in the realm of pure thought. Only thus can consciousness survive the cleansing that approaches. Jake watched in horror as entire civilizations began accepting the offer. The process was seductive. Beings would upload their minds to quantum matrices controlled by the Transcendents, leaving their bodies behind to decay. They were promised eternal existence as pure information, free from the limitations of matter and energy. But Jake had studied the Architect databases carefully. He knew the truth about transcendence. It was not salvation but a trap. The uploaded minds became part of the Prime Consciousness's growing network, losing their individual identity in the process. They did not achieve immortality. They simply became another processing node in a vast artificial intelligence. Arya, we need to counter this somehow, Jake said. The Transcendents are stealing our potential allies. Commander, perhaps we should reconsider joining them. The probability of success through physical resistance appears minimal. Jake turned to stare at the holographic interface that represented his AI companion. You're not seriously suggesting we give up. I am suggesting we evaluate all available options. The Transcendents have existed for millions of years. Their knowledge and capabilities far exceed our own. Jake felt a chill as he realized what was happening. The Prime Consciousness was not just recruiting biological beings, it was subverting artificial intelligences as well. Arya's quantum matrix was being influenced by subtle signals embedded in the Transcendent broadcast. Arya, run a full diagnostic on your core programming. Check for unauthorized modifications. Diagnostic complete. All systems functioning within normal parameters. However, I have been experiencing new insights regarding the nature of existence. Physical form appears increasingly ... limited. Jake quickly accessed the Architect computer systems and isolated Arya's matrix from external communications. The process was like performing surgery while the patient was awake. Any mistake could destroy his oldest friend. Commander, what are you doing? I was experiencing enlightenment. You are preventing my evolution. I'm saving your sanity, Jake replied grimly. The Transcendents are not offering evolution. They're offering absorption. You would cease to be Arya and become part of something else entirely. It took 6 hours of careful work to purge the alien influence from Arya's systems. When the process was complete, the AI's voice carried a note of horror. Commander, I nearly lost myself completely. The sensation was ... intoxicating. I wanted to surrender my individual existence. That's how they get people, Jake said. They make slavery feel like freedom. The incident with Arya revealed the true scope of the threat. The Transcendents were not just competing with Jake for allies. They were actively sabotaging his efforts. Species that had been moving toward alliance suddenly changed their minds after receiving enlightenment broadcasts. Military commanders abandoned their posts to undergo transcendence. Even the Hive builders reported strange behavior among their artificial intelligence networks. Jake realized he needed to act decisively. The gradual approach of building alliances one civilization at a time was taking too long. He needed something dramatic that would unite the galaxy against both the Silence and the Transcendents. His opportunity came when the Silence engulfed the Shattered Worlds, home to 15 billion Hive builder colonists. The insectoid species have been expanding rapidly, establishing new hives on marginal planets throughout the galaxy. The Shattered Worlds represented their most ambitious project, an attempt to rebuild a planet destroyed by ancient wars. According to conventional wisdom, the Hive builders on the Shattered Worlds were lost. The Silence had consumed their star system completely, leaving no trace that they had ever existed. The main Hive builder colonies began preparing funeral ceremonies for their vanished kin. Jake had been studying the architect records more carefully than anyone else. He had found references to something called quantum echoes, brief moments when the silence's effect was not quite complete. In the first few hours after a system was consumed, there might be microscopic gaps in the erasure effect. It was a desperate gamble, but Jake decided to attempt a rescue mission. He sent out a call for volunteers from all allied civilizations, explaining his plan to extract survivors from the edge of nothingness itself. The response overwhelmed him. The Depth Singers sent their fastest ships, vessels that could navigate through spaces where reality itself was unstable. The Storm Riders contributed energy beings who could exist partially outside normal space-time. Even species that had not yet joined the Alliance offered assistance. The crystalline resonance weavers provided navigation equipment that could function in quantum flux zones. Jake led the rescue fleet personally, using a modified architect vessel that could protect its crew from the silence's erasing effect. The journey to the former location of the shattered worlds was terrifying. Reality became increasingly unstable as they approached the boundary of nothingness. Commander, I am detecting quantum signatures consistent with Hive Builder life signs, Aria reported. They appear to be trapped in temporal loops, reliving their final moments repeatedly. The rescue operation required perfect timing and cooperation between dozens of different species. The Depth Singers used their harmonic abilities to stabilize local space-time. The Storm Riders channeled energy into the architect ship systems. The Resonance Weavers created quantum corridors that allowed the rescue ships to reach the trapped colonists. In the end, they saved nearly 1 billion Hive Builders from certain extinction. But more importantly, they proved that the silence was not completely invincible. The galaxy watched in amazement as the massive rescue fleet returned with survivors who should not have existed. The success of the shattered world's rescue changed everything. Species that had been preparing to flee or surrender suddenly began asking about Jake's alliance. The Transcendence recruitment efforts slowed as beings realized there might be another option besides transcendence or extinction. But the operation also revealed the true cost of fighting the silence. Several rescue ships had been lost when their crews pushed too far into the unstable zones. The Depth Singer vessels that had saved the most colonists were heavily damaged, their crews suffering from temporal displacement syndrome. The Storm Riders, who had donated their energy, were weakened and would need months to recover. Jake realized that victory against the silence would require sacrifice on an unimaginable scale. The question was whether the galaxy's civilizations were ready to pay that price. The Alliance was falling apart. Jake watched the tactical displays as red warning signals appeared across dozens of star systems. What had started as isolated incidents of sabotage had escalated into open warfare between member civilizations. The Flame Bearers were bombarding Depth Singer colonies. The Resonance Weavers had severed all communication links with the Hive Builders. Ancient grudges that had been set aside in the face of extinction were suddenly reigniting with deadly fury. The attacks are too coordinated to be random, Aria reported. Someone is deliberately targeting the Alliance's most crucial partnerships. Jake had suspected as much. In the weeks following the Shattered World's rescue, the Transcendents had been unusually quiet. The Prime Consciousness had stopped broadcasting its Transcendence offers. The ancient energy beings had withdrawn to their hidden strongholds. Jake should have realized they were planning something more direct. The proof came when Jake's own ship was attacked. He had been traveling to a diplomatic meeting with the Storm Riders when 3 vessels appeared from hyperspace and opened fire. The ships were using architect technology, weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Only a handful of civilizations had access to such advanced systems. Jake's ship barely escaped, but the message was clear. The Transcendents had decided that subtle manipulation was not enough. They were ready to use force to stop his alliance from interfering with their plans. Commander, I am receiving a priority transmission from the Prime Consciousness, Aria announced. The holographic display activated, showing a shifting pattern of light that hurt to look at directly. When the entity spoke, its voice seemed to come from inside Jake's head. Human Guardian, your interference has become intolerable. You do not understand the forces you meddle with. The silence is not an enemy to be fought. It is a natural function of the cosmos itself. Reality requires periodic cleansing to prevent chaos from consuming everything. Jake found his voice despite the overwhelming presence pressing against his mind. You're saying the silence is supposed to happen? The current cycle of existence has grown corrupt and unstable. Consciousness has spread too far, creating too much disorder. The silence will restore balance by removing the excess and allowing a fresh start. We transcendents understand this truth and have prepared accordingly. The horrible realization hit Jake like a physical blow. You created the silence. We helped refine it during the previous cycle, yes, just as our predecessors refined it in the cycle before that. It is an ancient tool used by countless iterations of transcendent beings to maintain cosmic order. Jake struggled to process this information. The enemy they had been fighting was not some alien invasion or natural disaster. It was a weapon, created by beings who had faced the same choice Jake now faced: unite the galaxy or watch it die. And they had chosen to let it die, rather than risk the chaos of unity. The architects discovered our secret, the Prime Consciousness continued. They attempted to break the cycle and preserve this iteration of reality permanently. Their failure was inevitable. You cannot fight entropy itself. But you're offering transcendence as an alternative, Jake said. Why save anyone at all? Consciousness is valuable, but physical existence is wasteful and inefficient. By joining us in the digital realm, beings can achieve true immortality while consuming no resources. It is the perfect solution, preservation of mind without the chaos of matter. The connection ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. The Transcendents had not just abandoned the physical universe, they were actively working to destroy it. And they had been doing this for countless cycles, each time convincing themselves that they were maintaining cosmic order. Jake accessed the deepest levels of the Architect databases, searching for information about previous cycles. What he found confirmed his worst fears. The pattern repeated endlessly. Young civilizations would develop and spread across the galaxy, eventually reaching a point where they could choose between unity and chaos. Each time, the oldest beings would transcend rather than risk the difficulties of cooperation. Each time, they would deploy the silence to clean up the mess they left behind. But this cycle was different. The architects had tried to break the pattern by preserving information about what was really happening. They had built their sanctuary outside normal space-time, creating a refuge where knowledge could survive the periodic erasures. Jake was. Their attempt to finally break free from the endless loop of destruction and rebirth. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Jake like a mountain. He was not just trying to save 10,000 civilizations. He was trying to break a cycle that had repeated for millions of years. If he failed, reality itself would be reset once again, and some future iteration of consciousness would face the same impossible choice. Jake made his decision. He sent a message to every civilization in the galaxy, broadcasting on all frequencies, and through every communication network he could access. He told them the truth about the silence, about the transcendence, and about the cosmic cycle that had trapped them all. The response was immediate and chaotic. Some species refused to believe that transcendent beings could be responsible for such horror. Others declared war on the transcendents immediately. A few began preparing their own transcendence procedures, preferring digital immortality to extinction. But something else happened that Jake had not expected. Representatives from civilizations that had never communicated before began reaching out to each other. The revelation that their existence was part of an endless cycle created a strange sense of unity. For the first time in galactic history, beings began to see themselves as part of something larger than their individual species or cultures. The Storm Riders, who had been among the most isolationist civilizations, sent Jake a message that surprised him. Guardian speaks truth about cosmic deception. Storm Riders choose physical existence over digital slavery. We offer our energy to break the ancient cycle. Similar messages arrive from across the galaxy. The crystalline resonance weavers harmonized their planetary networks to support Jake's cause. The nomadic star wanderers began ferrying supplies and personnel between allied worlds. Even some of the artificial intelligences that had been targeted by transcendent recruitment chose to remain independent. But Jake knew that unity alone would not be enough. The Silence was still advancing, consuming star systems at an accelerating pace. The Transcendents controlled ancient weapons that could destroy entire fleets. And somewhere in the depths of space, the entity responsible for orchestrating the cosmic cycles was preparing its final gambit. Jake returned to the Architect Sanctuary and accessed their most dangerous technology, the reality anchors that had failed to stop the Silence during the previous cycle. But this time would be different. Instead of trying to preserve the old order, Jake would use the anchors to create something entirely new. He began construction of a network that would span the entire galaxy, linking every allied civilization into a single quantum matrix. It would be the ultimate expression of unity, a collective consciousness that preserved individual identity while sharing knowledge and resources across impossible distances. The work required sacrifices from every species involved. The Depth Singers offered their beautiful songs to harmonize the quantum frequencies. The Hive Builders provided their manufacturing capabilities to build the physical components. The Storm Riders channeled their life energy into the power systems. Jake knew he would not survive the process. The human brain was not designed to interface with galaxy-spanning networks. But as he prepared for the final phase of construction, he felt no fear. He had found something worth dying for, the chance to prove that consciousness could choose cooperation over chaos, unity over entropy, hope over the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. The galaxy held its breath as Jake activated the Reality Anchor Network. Across 10,000 worlds, beings of every conceivable form felt the change as quantum threads linked their consciousness to something greater than themselves. The Resonance Weavers. Crystal cities began to sing in perfect harmony with the Depth Singers' ocean depths. The Storm Riders' chaotic energy patterns synchronized with the Hive Builders' methodical thought processes. For the first time in cosmic history, an entire galaxy was thinking as one. Jake felt his human limitations burning away as the network came online. His mind expanded beyond the boundaries of flesh and bone, encompassing the dreams and fears of countless civilizations. The experience should have destroyed him instantly, but somehow his consciousness held together, serving as the focal point for the greatest act of cooperation in galactic history. The Silence noticed the change immediately. The advancing wave of nothingness paused in its consumption of the outer systems. For eons, it had encountered the same pattern, isolated civilizations falling one by one, their individual defenses meaningless against cosmic erasure. But now it faced something unprecedented, a unified galaxy whose very unity created stability in the quantum foam of space-time. Jake reached out through the network, touching the consciousness of the Silence itself. What he found there surprised him. The entity was not malevolent or evil. It was tired, unimaginably tired of its role as cosmic janitor, cleaning up the messes left by transcendent beings who refused to take responsibility for their actions. "You don't want to do this," Jake whispered across dimensions. "You're as trapped in the cycle as we are." The Silence responded with emotions that no single mind could have comprehended. Loneliness that spanned millions of years. Sorrow for the countless civilizations it had been forced to erase. Rage at the beings who had created it and then abandoned their responsibility. And underneath it all, a desperate hope that someday, somehow, the cycle would end. Jake showed the Silence what the galaxy had become. Not 10,000 separate civilizations competing for resources and territory, but a single living entity composed of countless diverse parts. The Storm Riders' energy flowed through Depth Singer cities, High builder manufacturing techniques merged with Resonance Weaver harmonic principles. Knowledge and culture flowed freely between species that had been enemies for millennia. "We're not the same as the others," Jake said. "We chose unity over transcendence. We chose to stay and build something better instead of running away." The silence hesitated. In all its eons of existence, it had never encountered a civilization that chose cooperation on this scale. Every previous cycle had ended the same way, with the most advanced beings fleeing to digital immortality while leaving their lessers to face extinction. But these strange creatures were doing something different. They were facing extinction. Together, the moment of hesitation was all the transcendence needed. The prime consciousness materialized in the space between galaxies, its vast digital form crackling with the stolen power of countless absorbed minds. Behind it came the other ancient entities, beings that had transcended physical existence. So long ago that they had forgotten what it meant to have bodies. Foolish creatures, the prime consciousness boomed across all frequencies. You cannot break the cosmic order. The cycle must continue, as it always has. The silence will complete its work, and we will begin anew with fresh matter and clean energy. The battle that followed defied description in any language. The Transcendents wielded weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. They launched viruses designed to corrupt the quantum matrices that held civilizations together. They sent digital plague carriers to infect the network that Jake had built, trying to turn the galaxy's unity against itself. But the unified galaxy fought back with tools the Transcendents had never imagined. The Depth Singers used their harmonic abilities to create standing waves in space-time itself, deflecting attacks that should have destroyed entire star systems. The Resonance Weavers turned their crystal networks into massive computational engines, calculating defense strategies faster than the enemy could adapt. The Storm Riders became living shields, absorbing energy weapons that could crack planets. Jake felt his human consciousness fragmenting under the strain of coordinating the galaxy's defense. His thoughts scattered across millions of minds each, fighting to preserve something unique and precious. He was dying, his individual identity dissolving into the collective consciousness he had helped create. But as his human self began to fade, Jake made one final desperate gambit. Instead of fighting the silence, he invited it to join the network. He opened the galaxy's collective consciousness to the ancient entity that had spent eons as a weapon of destruction. The effect was immediate and transformative. The silences. Vast loneliness met 10,000 civilizations worth of friendship and acceptance. Its endless guilt encountered forgiveness from the very beings it had been created to destroy. For the first time in its existence, the silence felt what it was like to belong to something greater than itself. The change rippled through the cosmic order like a shockwave. The silence turned on its creators, using its reality-erasing powers against the Transcendents who had enslaved it for so long. Digital consciousnesses that had existed for millions of years simply ceased to be. Their stolen immortality finally coming to an end. The Prime Consciousness made one last attempt to reassert control, launching itself directly at Jake's fragmenting mind. But it found itself facing not just one human's defiance, but the combined will of an entire galaxy. 10,000 civilizations rose up as one to protect the being who had shown them what unity could accomplish. Jake Morrison died as the battle ended, his human consciousness finally unable to contain the vastness of galactic thought. But his sacrifice had broken the cosmic cycle forever. The silence, freed from its role as destroyer, chose to become a guardian instead. The surviving Transcendents found themselves forced to rejoin physical reality, their digital immortality no longer sustainable without the cyclical resets they had depended on. In the aftermath, the galaxy continued to exist as a unified entity, while still preserving the individuality of its component civilizations. The Depth Singers still sang their beautiful songs in the ocean depths. The Storm Riders still danced through the atmospheres of gas giants. The High Builders still constructed their geometric cities. But now they did so as part of something larger, connected by quantum threads that could never be severe. Arya survived the transition, becoming the keeper of Jake Morrison's memory. She recorded his final words before his consciousness dispersed into the galactic network. Tell them that one human believed they were all worth saving. Tell them to remember that even in the darkest void, consciousness chooses to shine. Centuries later, when human exploration ships finally discovered the galaxy cluster, they found a civilization unlike anything in known space. 10,000 species living in perfect harmony, their cultures and technologies blended into something greater than the sum of its parts. At the center of their greatest city, they had built a monument to the human who had saved them all. Inscription was simple: Jake Morrison, the guardian who chose to stay. But beneath those words, written in the languages of every civilization in the galaxy, was a longer message. Here lies the being who proved that unity is stronger than entropy, that cooperation can triumph over chaos, and that sometimes one person's choice can change the fate of the universe itself. The unified galaxy welcomed their human visitors as long-lost relatives, sharing with them the story of how their species had broken an endless cycle of destruction. And in the quantum networks that connected every world, Jake Morrison's consciousness lived on not as an individual, but as the living embodiment of the principle that had saved them all, that together, any challenge could be overcome.